now have a base mesh that we can actually begin the process of unwrapping. And as I showed you in the last video, I've mirrored this object over. It is not connected along the center seam of edges or the center loop. And the reason for that is because of how I'm going to unwrap components of my mesh. Now I could unwrap this whole object if I wanted to inside the UV space that you see here. This is 0 to 1 UV space. And if I just go ahead and hit the Unwrap tool and hit Unwrap, well, okay, that's kind of a crazy unwrap, but you get the idea that I'm going to have both sides inside this space. What I want to do is I actually only want to unwrap one side, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that. And in this way, I'll be able to take up more space with this one side, and then I'll mirror it on over, and I just offset it in UV space to what is actually another space out here. And that's how Valve handles their UVs for Dota 2, especially as far as being able to maximize. Now, what I did there was I used the Unwrap tool. And what that does is it unwraps the mesh that you have in your scene, kind of like a pelt. And since I have these open edges right here along the outer edge, I can select an edge, press L for the loop, and my edge selection is showing up in the UV view as well. And so the outer borders are what are being used to kind of stretch this pelt out. And since we actually have this split along the center axis, this is very easy. It's a very common thing in games to have mirrored textures to take greater advantage of the limited texture space. All right, so I really don't want to unwrap this whole object though. I want to split it up into multiple segments. So I'm going to split it here, and all I have to do is hold on the Shift key and select some edges, then come down to say this loop right down here, and select those edges. And now, since I selected those edges, it's actually going to split them apart when it unwraps, as you can see right now. And I can just left click and drag, and you see the iterations increasing and decreasing. And you can kind of feel out what gives you a good result by just dragging back and forth while holding down the left mouse button. Now I have the matte cap shader on right now. I probably actually want to have a UV image like this on presently. Now, what I need to do to add a UV image, you can't see it yet, but I'll load it up, is go ahead and actually just right click in your shader tree, come down to the preset browser palette, and here underneath images, we have UV. And if I scroll on down, we have all these different UV map images that are really good for helping to create your UV map. So I'll click on this image, I'll click and drag and then drop it right into the shader tree. And there we go. We've got a UV image here, and I believe it's correctly assigned. Let's come up to the texture locator. Since that image is selected, it has a locator and layers. Layers control just visibility properties, basically, like anti-aliasing. I actually don't want that on. I'll come up to the texture locator. And the texture locator is how you tell the image to be represented on your mesh. And right now it's using UV map texture. Well, actually, I don't want that one, do I? Let's see. Come up to list. Yeah, I do want UV map texture. That's perfect. And if I grab a UV island, this is really cool. If I press the right bracket in the UV view, it'll only select that island. And press Alt D to center on my selection. As I move that component around, you can see the UV moving around underneath it. And our goal we unwrapped was to have very uniform squares, because that represents a nice clean unwrap, which we're not quite there yet. We really have some rather large squares back here and small ones here. So let's optimize this a little bit further using the UV relax tool and come into adaptive mode, set the iterations down at 0, left click and drag out in the UV view. You can see what it's doing is it's adaptively unwrapping. It's trying to make sure that basically the whole mesh shares the same level of distortion. And you can see there in the view interactively what a nice job it does of improving the unwrap. Now, as you get to high iterations, it slows down. So I like to just type in like a level like 2000, click in the viewport and let it go ahead and process that, because that's a lot of iterations to run through. And then I'm, for the most part, guaranteed to have a really nice, precise UV unwrap. And once that's done, I'll drop the tool. I'll go ahead and just select some polys and start moving items into place as far as how I want them oriented. Now, if I don't want to do that, I can come up here to pack UVs, and pack UVs will automatically pack them up, and it does an extremely good job of it compared to most tools out there. I personally prefer to kind of really tune my items into place, and I usually start up in one corner because then I can try and make sure that my UV layout kind of fits a square, and I'll just start tweaking these various components in a place so I can maximize my UV space. Now, I'll show you this next UV map. This is where I got to after I, really kind of started the process of tweaking and tuning and refining my UV map. But if you'll notice, one of the things about this is kind of interesting. The blade is straight. And that allows me to make sure that I can put these pole components where I want to. And if I come over to the actual previous UV map, you can see that if I want to do something similar to that, I'd actually have to have my UVs overlapping, which you don't want that to happen. You do not want overlapping UVs. They're a bad thing. So how do you get around this problem? MODO has a lot of awesome UV tools. Now, first off, let's just make this fit the whole UV space. And we're going to do that with fit UVs and key proportion. And there you go. Now they're fit. You can even scale them in, to a scale of U and V at 99%. So you have a border around the edge that helps with baking. And let's go ahead and just select this item, select all the polys on it using the right bracket key after selecting a polygon. Come to the UV Relax tool, come to Unwrap mode, and set your iterations down to 0. Turn on interactive, and also turn on save constraints. And now if we zoom in on this object, we can actually add constraints to particular vertices on our mesh and do it kind of towards the interior. Don't do it on the outside edges. There are plenty of reasons why you do want to do it on the outside, but it's a common mistake people make. Really what you're doing is you're almost rigging up your UVs in this case. And so I'm clicking on kind of, locations that I think are going to produce a nice rigging of my unwrap. And if I want to preserve it, I kind of go towards the outer borders like that. So there we go. I have these constraints in place, right? Now, as I increase the number of iterations over here, you can see my mesh is unwrapping, but it's being constrained. And if I went ahead and added another constraint there and ran through the iterations again, you see it holds that point in place and unwraps around it. So it's a really great way of being able to control your unwrap to a point where, like, if I have a high number of iterations, like 139, like you saw, I can go ahead and grab, I'll delete that one because it's just getting in the way. And I just wanted to form it just with that one and start pulling components of my mesh into place. And it's a really interesting way of being able to control a rigged UV. And you can see the effect here of your adjustments. And this allows you to kind of create a uniform distortion and maximize your UV space and move your UV around the items that they're kind of getting in the way of each other with. And so go ahead and add one right there and kind of move that on back. And once you get kind of close, let's make sure that polygon selection is still active. Come to UV Relax tool, back to adaptive mode, and 0 because we just want to do a little bit of a relax. You see, it will adaptively relax it into a better orientation than it was in before because now we have that very nice straight blade and we no longer have overlapping UVs. So extremely cool ways of being able to use our UV tools. And what I like to do, like I showed you earlier, was create maximized UVs. And this is done, I'll quickly show you, with a well-tailored UV map, such as this one. What I do is I select a couple edges on a border, press the up arrow key to select each edge following the one before it. It's a great selection tool. Press the this button right here, and that will align all those edges to the farthest edge on the right. And you can go through and do this on all the different areas of your mesh, and at least as far as how it corresponds. So align UVs, there we go. And then select that mesh object and UV relax, adaptive, but this time lock the boundary. And so that outside border will be maintained and the UVs inside that space will be adaptively relaxed to kind of fit the new changes that you made to the geometry. And so in this way, you're really maximizing the UV space, and that's how you end up with a UV map such as this, which is the type of thing that you really want for a game that only allows you to have a 256 by 256 pixel image. So again, MODO's UV tools, some of the best in the industry. And one of the things I constantly hear from people is, for some reason, MODO has actually made UVs fun. Not again, but just in general. It's definitely made them fun.